What if the reason you feel lost right now is not because God has left you, but because He is leading you somewhere you have never been before? Think about that for a moment. What if the confusion, the uncertainty, the unanswered questions, and the frustration you are carrying today are not signs that your life is falling apart? What if they are signs that God is quietly moving things into place for a future you cannot yet see? Maybe lately you have been asking yourself questions nobody seems able to answer. Why is this happening to me? Why does it feel like everyone else knows where they are going while I feel completely stuck? Why do I keep praying and still feel uncertain about what comes next? If you have been asking those questions, you are not alone. In fact, some of the people God used most powerfully in Scripture walked through seasons where they felt confused, uncertain, and completely dependent on Him. Joseph had a dream from God, but instead of seeing it fulfilled, he found himself betrayed by his own brothers. David was chosen to be king, yet spent years running for his life. Moses was called by God, but before leading a nation, he spent decades in a wilderness that probably seemed pointless at the time. None of them could see the full picture. None of them understood what God was doing. Yet every setback, every delay, and every unexpected turn became part of a greater plan. And maybe that is exactly what is happening in your life right now. Because one of the greatest mistakes we make is assuming that God is absent simply because we cannot see Him working. We think that if the answer has not arrived, God must be silent. If the door has not opened, God must have forgotten us. If the situation has not changed, God must not be listening. But what if God is doing His most important work behind the scenes? What if the answer you are waiting for is already being prepared? What if the delay you are fighting against is actually protecting you from something you cannot see? The book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths." Notice what that verse does not say. It does not say understand everything. It does not say figure everything out. It does not say control every outcome. It says trust. That is difficult when life feels uncertain. That is difficult when prayers seem unanswered. That is difficult when the future looks unclear. But throughout this message, you will discover something powerful. You will discover that some seasons of confusion are not obstacles. They are invitations. You will discover that God often works in ways that are invisible before they become undeniable. And you will discover that even when you feel lost, God is already working in your favor. Because the truth is, there may be a reason God has not shown you the entire path yet. And once you understand that reason, you may never look at uncertainty the same way again. The hidden reason God allows seasons of uncertainty. One of the most uncomfortable feelings a person can experience is not knowing what comes next. You can handle a difficult situation if you know how it will end. You can endure a challenge if you know there is a solution waiting ahead. What truly shakes the human heart is uncertainty. It is waking up in the morning and not knowing which direction to take. It is praying for guidance and feeling as though the answer has not arrived yet. Most people see uncertainty as a problem. God often uses it as a tool. That may sound surprising, but if you look closely at the way God worked throughout Scripture, you will notice a pattern. He rarely revealed the entire journey before asking someone to take the first step. Think about Abraham. God called him to leave everything familiar behind: his home, his comfort, his security. Yet God did not hand him a detailed map explaining every turn, every challenge, and every blessing that lay ahead. The book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 8 says that Abraham obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Imagine that. No complete explanation. No guaranteed timeline. No visible evidence. Just trust. That is how faith grows. Most of us want clarity before obedience. We want God to show us the whole picture before we take action. We want certainty before commitment. We want proof before trust. But if God revealed everything in advance, faith would not be necessary. You see, uncertainty has a way of exposing what we truly depend on. When life is predictable, it is easy to say we trust God. But when the future becomes unclear, something deeper is revealed. we begin to discover whether our confidence is in God's promises or in our ability to control outcomes. That is why some of the greatest spiritual growth happens during seasons that make the least sense. Those seasons force us to stop relying on our own understanding. They force us to pray differently. They force us to listen more carefully. They force us to depend on God in ways we never would have chosen on our own. The book of Isaiah, chapter 55, verses 8 and 9, reminds us that God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and His ways are higher than our ways. In other words, there will be moments when His plan does not make sense from where you are standing. Not because He is confused, because He sees what you cannot see. He sees dangers ahead. He sees opportunities ahead. He sees connections, relationships, and outcomes that are completely hidden from your view. What feels like uncertainty to you is complete clarity to Him. That is why you should not assume that feeling lost means you are moving in the wrong direction. Sometimes you are closer to God's purpose than ever before. Sometimes the season that feels the most confusing is the season where God is preparing the biggest transformation of your life. And that transformation often begins with something many people do not expect. Before God changes your circumstances, He frequently allows you to outgrow the life you have been living, when your old life no longer fits your future. Have you ever reached a point where nothing around you seemed wrong, yet something inside you felt different? The same routines, the same environment, the same people, the same goals. Yet somehow, what once felt comfortable no longer feels the same. You cannot fully explain it. You just know that something is changing. Many people become frightened during moments like this. They think they are losing direction. They think they are becoming ungrateful. They think something is wrong because the life that once felt meaningful suddenly feels too small. But what if that feeling is not a problem? What if it is a sign that God is preparing you for a future that your current life can no longer contain? Growth often begins with discomfort. Before a new season can begin, the old season starts losing its ability to satisfy you. The dreams that once excited you no longer carry the same weight. The priorities that once controlled your decisions begin to shift. The things you used to chase start feeling less important. And the strange part is that this usually happens before you know what comes next. That is why this season can feel so confusing. You are no longer who you used to be, but you have not fully become who God is calling you to be. You find yourself standing between two chapters. One is ending. The other has not yet fully appeared. This is where many people make a costly mistake. They try to force themselves back into an old season because it feels familiar. They return to old habits, old mindsets, old limitations. Not because those things are good for them, but because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Yet God does not call people backward. He calls them forward. Think about the disciples when Jesus invited them to follow Him. Fishing boats were familiar. Their old lives were predictable. Their future was uncertain. But everything God had prepared for them existed beyond the life they already knew. The same principle often applies to us. Sometimes God allows dissatisfaction with the old because He is creating hunger for the new. Not dissatisfaction rooted in greed, dissatisfaction rooted in purpose. A holy awareness that there is more ahead than what is behind. The book of 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 17 says that if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. Notice that transformation always requires transition. You cannot step fully into a new season while clinging tightly to an old one. You cannot become the person God is calling you to be while insisting on remaining the person you used to be. That is why these seasons often feel uncomfortable. God is stretching your faith, expanding your perspective, preparing your heart. And while all of this is happening, another question begins to surface. If God is leading you somewhere new, why does it sometimes take so long? Why do answers seem delayed? Why does it feel like heaven is moving slower than expected? The answer may reveal something about God's timing that most people never fully understand. The divine purpose behind delayed answers. Nothing tests faith quite like waiting. You pray, You believe, you trust. Then days pass, weeks pass, months pass, sometimes even years pass, and the answer you expected still has not arrived. This is the moment when many people begin asking difficult questions. God, are you listening? God, do you see what I'm going through? God, why is nothing changing? The painful truth is that most people do not struggle when God says yes. Most people do not struggle when God performs a miracle. Most people struggle during the silence between the prayer and the answer, because waiting can feel like rejection when you do not understand what God is doing. But what if the delay is not rejection at all? What if the delay itself is part of the answer? One of the biggest misconceptions about faith is believing that God's timing should match our timing. We see today's problem. God sees the next 10 years. We focus on immediate relief. God focuses on lasting transformation. We want the answer now. God wants the answer to arrive at the right moment. The difference is enormous. Think about Joseph. When God gave him a dream, he probably expected it to happen quickly. Instead, he experienced betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and prison. From a human perspective, every year looked like a step away from God's promise. But from God's perspective, every year was preparation. Joseph was not simply waiting for promotion, he was being prepared for responsibility. Because receiving a blessing before you are ready for it can be just as dangerous as never receiving it at all. That is a truth many people overlook. Sometimes God delays an answer because he is preparing the circumstances. Sometimes he delays an answer because he is preparing other people. Sometimes he delays an answer because he is preparing you. The book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 11 says that God makes everything beautiful in its time. Not our time, his time. And his timing is perfect even when it feels frustrating. Think about how many blessings in your life would have become burdens if they had arrived too early. How many relationships, how many opportunities, how many responsibilities, how many doors. Looking back, you can probably see moments when you were asking God for something that you were not yet prepared to handle. At the time, the delay felt painful. Now you understand the wisdom behind it. The same may be true about what you are facing right now. The answer has not been forgotten. The promise has not been canceled. The prayer has not been ignored. God is still working, even when you cannot see movement, even when you cannot see progress, even when everything appears unchanged. Because God's activity is not measured by what your eyes can see. It is measured by his faithfulness. And sometimes, while you are waiting for him to add something to your life, he begins removing something instead. That can feel confusing. It can even feel painful. But many times, what God removes is just as important as what he provides. Why God often removes what you thought you needed. There is a kind of pain that feels especially difficult to understand. It is the pain of losing something you believed God wanted you to keep. A relationship you prayed for ends. An opportunity you worked hard for disappears. A door you were certain would open suddenly closes. A plan you carefully built falls apart. And in those moments, one question often rises to the surface. God, why would you take this away? The question is understandable, because from our perspective, we only see what we are losing. God sees what we are gaining. That is an important difference. Many times we become attached to things that were only meant to serve a temporary purpose in our lives. A season becomes comfortable. A relationship becomes familiar. A dream becomes part of our identity. Without realizing it, we begin trusting those things more than we trust God himself. Then one day, God allows them to leave. Not because he wants to hurt us, because he loves us too much to let temporary things become permanent idols. The difficult part is that God's removals rarely feel like blessings at first. They feel like losses. They feel like disappointments. They feel like unanswered prayers. But often, they are acts of protection. Think about a child holding tightly to something dangerous. The child may cry when a loving parent takes it away, not because the parent is being cruel, because the parent can see what the child cannot. God often operates the same way. He sees consequences we cannot see. He sees future problems we cannot predict. He sees roads that appear attractive today but lead to pain tomorrow. That is why some closed doors are actually answers to prayers we do not yet understand. The book of John, chapter 15, verse 2 teaches that every branch that bears fruit is pruned so that it can bear even more fruit. Notice something remarkable. The branch is not cut because it is failing. It is cut because it is growing. Pruning is not punishment. Pruning is preparation, and preparation is rarely comfortable. The challenge is that we usually ask God to bless what we already have. God is often preparing something better than what we are holding on to. But we cannot receive the new while refusing to release the old. We cannot move into a new season while insisting on living in a previous one. This is why some of God's greatest blessings first appear as losses. Years later, many people look back and realize that the relationship that ended protected them. The opportunity they lost redirected them. The plan that failed prepared them. The door that closed saved them. At the time, they could not see it. Now they would not change it. Because God knew exactly what He was doing. And yet, even after understanding this truth, many people continue struggling with something deeper. They want to know exactly why God is doing what He is doing. They want immediate explanations, immediate clarity, immediate certainty. What they do not realize is that this desire can quietly become one of the greatest obstacles to spiritual growth. The spiritual danger of needing every answer. Right now. Most people believe their greatest problem is uncertainty. But often the real problem is something deeper. It is the need to eliminate uncertainty before they are willing to trust God. Think about how many times you have asked questions like these. God, why is this happening? God, what should I do next? God, when will things change? There is nothing wrong with asking those questions. The problem begins when your peace becomes dependent on receiving immediate answers. Because if you need to understand everything before you can trust God, your faith will always remain limited by your understanding. And your understanding is limited. Mine is limited. Everyone's is. That is why God never asks us to trust our own perspective above His. Yet that is exactly what many people attempt to do. They want complete explanations before taking a step of faith. They want guarantees before obedience. They want certainty before commitment. In other words, they want to see the entire staircase before taking the first step. But that is rarely how God works. Throughout Scripture, God consistently invited people to move before they had all the answers. Noah built an ark before seeing the flood. Abraham left home before seeing the promise. Peter stepped out of the boat before understanding how the miracle would unfold. Faith always moved first. Understanding came later. The reason is simple. God is not merely trying to reveal His plan. He is trying to build a relationship, and relationships are built through trust. Imagine if a child only trusted a parent after receiving a complete explanation for every decision. That relationship would never mature. Real trust develops when you believe someone's character even when you do not fully understand their actions. The same is true with God. The book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding." Notice the contrast. Trust God. Do not lean entirely on your own understanding. Why? Because there will be moments when God's wisdom and your understanding appear to move in opposite directions. There will be situations where His silence seems confusing, His timing seems slow, His methods seem strange, yet He remains faithful. One of the greatest sources of anxiety in modern life is the illusion that we must know everything. We want answers immediately, results immediately, solutions immediately. But spiritual maturity teaches a different lesson. It teaches us that peace is not found in having every answer. Peace is found in knowing the one who does. That changes everything. Because when you stop demanding immediate explanations, you become free to trust God's process. You stop obsessing over what you cannot control. You stop trying to force doors open. You stop carrying burdens that belong in His hands. And something remarkable begins to happen. You start noticing that even when circumstances seem unchanged, God is actively working beneath the surface. In fact, some of His most important work happens during the seasons when it appears that nothing at all is happening. What God is building, while nothing seems to be happening. Have you ever looked at your life and thought nothing is changing? The The same problems, the same waiting, the same unanswered questions, the same uncertainty. You pray, but the situation looks identical to yesterday. You trust, but the breakthrough still seems far away. You keep moving forward, but it feels like you are making no progress at all. If you have ever felt that way, you are not alone. In fact, some of God's most important work happens during seasons that appear completely unproductive. The challenge is that we tend to evaluate progress through visible results. We notice open doors. We notice promotions. We notice opportunities. We notice breakthroughs. But God often begins His work in places where human eyes cannot see. Think about a tree. Long before anyone admires its height, its roots are growing underground. No applause, no recognition, no visible evidence. Yet the unseen growth is what makes future growth possible. Without strong roots, the tree cannot withstand the storms that will eventually come. The same principle applies to your spiritual life. Many times, while you are focused on changing circumstances, God is focused on building character. While you are praying for a different situation, God is developing a different version of you, a stronger version, a wiser version, a more faithful version, a version capable of carrying the blessings He intends to place in your hands. That process rarely feels exciting. In fact, it often feels frustrating because growth usually happens slowly, day by day, decision by decision, prayer by prayer. You may not notice the transformation while it is occurring, but over time, something begins to change. Your reactions become different. Your perspective becomes different. Your priorities become different. The fears that once controlled you lose some of their power. The worries that once consumed your thoughts no longer dominate your mind in the same way. Without realizing it, God has been building strength where weakness once existed. The book of James, chapter 1, verses 2 through 4 teaches that trials produce perseverance, and perseverance develops maturity. Notice that God does not waste difficult seasons. Every challenge can become part of your development. Every delay can strengthen your patience. Every obstacle can deepen your dependence on Him. This is why you should never assume that nothing is happening simply because nothing is visible. God may be preparing opportunities. He may be preparing relationships. He may be preparing circumstances. But most importantly, He may be preparing you. And when God prepares a person before providing a blessing, that blessing becomes far more sustainable. Because blessings can be lost. Character remains. Success can disappear. Wisdom remains. Opportunities come and go. Faith remains. That is why some of God's greatest work is hidden at first. Not because He is absent, because foundations are always built before structures rise. And while God is quietly building beneath the surface, He is also guiding you in ways you may not even recognize. The surprising part is that His guidance does not always arrive through dramatic miracles. Sometimes it comes through ordinary moments that change everything. The unexpected ways. God guides a confused heart. When people ask God for direction, they often expect something dramatic. A sign in the sky, a powerful voice, a sudden revelation that removes every doubt and answers every question. And while God is certainly able to work in extraordinary ways, that is not how He guides most people most of the time. In fact, one of the reasons many believers feel confused is because they are waiting for guidance to arrive in a form they expect, while God is already guiding them in ways they have overlooked. Think about this. How many times have you asked God for a clear answer while ignoring the small convictions He has already placed in your heart? How many times have you prayed for a sign while resisting the wisdom He has already shown you? Sometimes God's guidance is not loud. Sometimes it is quiet. It comes as a gentle conviction, a persistent thought, a growing sense of direction, a feeling that you need to move forward, even if you cannot explain why. The book of 1 Kings, chapter 19, verses 11 and 12, tells us that Elijah did not find God in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire. He encountered God in a gentle whisper. Many people miss God's direction because they are only listening for thunder while He is speaking through whispers. Another way God guides is through peace. Not the kind of peace that comes when every problem disappears. The kind of peace that remains even when questions still exist. You may not know exactly what comes next. You may not understand every detail. Yet deep inside there is a quiet confidence that God is leading you. The book of Philippians chapter 4 verse 7 describes this peace as something that surpasses understanding. That means it exists even when circumstances do not seem to justify it. God also guides through closed doors. This may be one of the most misunderstood forms of guidance. Most people celebrate open doors. Few people thank God for closed ones. Yet some of the greatest blessings in your life may have begun as disappointments. The job you did not get, the relationship that did not work, the opportunity that disappeared, the plan that fell apart. At the time, those experiences felt painful. Later, they revealed themselves as protection. Because God can guide you by saying no just as effectively as He guides you by saying yes. And then there are the people He places in your path. A conversation, a message, a piece of advice, a scripture that suddenly speaks directly into your situation. What seems ordinary in the moment can become a turning point later. The truth is that God is often guiding you more than you realize. The challenge is not always His willingness to lead. The challenge is learning to recognize His voice in everyday life, because the reality is this: God rarely reveals the entire path at once. He usually reveals enough light for the next step, then the next, then the next. And sometimes the path He chooses looks completely different from the one you originally planned. What feels like a detour may actually become one of the greatest blessings of your entire life. Why some detours are greater than the destination. Have you ever looked back on a season of your life and realized that what felt like a setback was actually one of the best things that ever happened to you? At the time, it felt frustrating. It felt unfair. It felt like your plans were being interrupted. But years later, you could see something you were unable to see in the moment. That detour changed you. That unexpected turn taught you something. That delay prepared you for something greater. Most people spend their lives focused on destinations. They think happiness exists at the end of the journey. They think peace exists at the end of the journey. They think fulfillment exists at the end of the journey. But God often places some of life's greatest blessings within the journey itself. The problem is that we are usually so focused on where we want to go that we fail to notice what God is doing along the way. Think about the nation of Israel. After leaving Egypt, they expected a direct path into the Promised Land. Instead, God led them into the wilderness. From a human perspective, that route made no sense. It looked inefficient. It looked unnecessary. It looked like a delay. But God understood something they did not. The people who left Egypt were not yet ready for the future He had prepared for them. Before they could enter the Promised Land, they needed to learn dependence, trust, obedience, faith. The wilderness was not wasting time. The wilderness was preparing them. That same principle often applies to our lives. There are seasons that feel like detours because they do not match our expectations. You expected one outcome. God led you toward another. You planned one direction. God redirected you toward something different. At first, that redirection feels disappointing, but later you discover that the road you never wanted became the road that transformed you. Many of the strongest people you will ever meet were shaped by seasons they never would have chosen. Not because suffering is good, but because God is able to bring purpose out of difficulty. The book of Romans chapter 8 verse 28 reminds us that God works all things together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. Notice what that verse does not say. It does not say all things are good. It says God works through all things for good. That includes detours. That includes delays. That includes disappointments. That includes seasons that seem confusing while you are living through them. Sometimes the destination changes your circumstances. The journey changes you. And often the person God is shaping along the way becomes more valuable than the destination itself. Because one day the destination will arrive. But the character developed during the journey will remain with you for the rest of your life. And eventually, every believer reaches a moment when they realize something important. Many of the burdens they have been carrying throughout that journey were never meant to be carried by them in the first place. The moment you stop carrying what belongs to God, there is a question I want you to ask yourself honestly. How much of your exhaustion comes from your circumstances, and how much comes from trying to control things that only God can control? Think about it. How many nights have you stayed awake replaying the same problems in your mind? How many times have you tried to solve situations that had no solution in your own strength? How much energy have you spent worrying about outcomes that have not even happened yet? For many people, the greatest burden in life is not the challenge itself. It is the responsibility they have assumed for things that were never theirs to carry. They carry tomorrow's worries today. They carry other people's choices. They carry fears about the future. They carry unanswered questions. They carry outcomes that belong in God's hands. And eventually, the weight becomes unbearable. Not because life is impossible, because they are carrying more than they were designed to carry. The truth is that God never asked you to manage the entire future. He never asked you to guarantee success. He never asked you to solve every problem. He never asked you to control every outcome. Those responsibilities belong to Him. Your responsibility is different. Your responsibility is faithfulness, obedience, trust, daily dependence on Him. That is why so many people live under constant stress. They are trying to perform a role that only God can fulfill. The book of 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7 gives a simple but powerful instruction. Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. Notice the word all, not some, not the small worries, not the easy problems. All of it, the fears, the uncertainty, the disappointments, the burdens, the questions, the future, everything. Because God never intended for you to carry those things alone. Yet many believers do exactly that. They pray for 5 minutes and then spend the next 10 hours worrying. They ask God for help and then immediately take the burden back into their own hands. They trust Him with eternity, but struggle to trust Him with next week. The reason this happens is simple. Control feels safer than surrender. At least it appears that way. When you are holding on to the burden, it feels like you are doing something. When you surrender it to God, you must trust Him to handle it. And trust requires faith. But here is what many people discover. The burden becomes lighter the moment they stop trying to carry it alone. The problem may still exist. The challenge may still be present. The answer may not have arrived yet. But peace begins to replace panic. Confidence begins to replace fear. Because they finally understand something important. God is better at being God than they are. The moment you stop trying to control everything is often the moment you begin experiencing the peace you have been searching for. And once that burden is released, something remarkable starts to happen. You begin noticing that some of the plans you thought were ruined may not have been ruined at all. In fact, God may have been using those broken plans to build something far better than you ever imagined. How God uses broken plans to reveal better ones. Few things hurt more than watching a plan collapse, especially when you prayed about it, especially when you worked hard for it, especially when you genuinely believed it was going to happen. You imagined the outcome. You saw the future in your mind. You invested your time, your energy, and your hope. Then suddenly, everything changed. The opportunity disappeared. The relationship ended. The door closed. The plan failed. And what hurts most is not simply losing what you had. It is losing what you thought your future was going to be. That is why broken plans can feel so devastating. They force us to let go of a future we had already begun living inside our imagination. And in those moments, many people quietly ask a painful question. God, where were you? The surprising answer is this. He was exactly where He has always been, working, guiding, protecting, preparing. The problem is that God's protection does not always look like protection in the moment. Sometimes it looks like disappointment. Sometimes it looks like rejection. Sometimes it looks like failure. But later, it reveals itself as mercy. Think about all the things you once wanted that you are grateful you never received. The relationship that would have damaged your future. The opportunity that would have taken you away from your purpose. The decision that would have created years of regret. At the time, losing those things felt painful. Today, You can see God's wisdom. The challenge is that we rarely recognize His wisdom while we are still in the middle of the process. The book of Proverbs, chapter 19, verse 21 says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." That verse is not meant to discourage you. It is meant to comfort you, because it reminds us that God's purpose is stronger than our mistakes, stronger than our disappointments, stronger than our failed plans. Even when life seems to move in the wrong direction, God remains capable of bringing us exactly where we need to be. Joseph is a powerful example of this truth. If you had asked him while he was sitting in prison whether his life was moving toward God's promise, he probably would have struggled to understand what was happening. Nothing looked right. Nothing looked fair. Nothing looked promising. Yet every event that appeared to be working against him was secretly working for him. The betrayal, the slavery, the prison. All of it became part of God's plan. The same God who worked through Joseph's broken plans is still working today. Perhaps the setback you are facing is not the end of the story. Perhaps it is the beginning of a better one. Perhaps God is removing your plan because He sees a future that is far greater than the one you imagined. And sometimes, even before that future arrives, heaven begins leaving clues, small signs, quiet evidence, subtle reminders that God is already moving, even though the final breakthrough has not yet appeared. The signs heaven is moving even before you see results. One of the biggest mistakes people make during difficult seasons is assuming that if they cannot see results, nothing is happening. But that is not how God works. In fact, some of the strongest evidence of God's activity appears long before the breakthrough itself arrives. The problem is that most people are looking for dramatic signs, a miracle, an immediate answer, a sudden transformation. Meanwhile, God is often working through smaller changes that quietly reveal His hand. The first sign is this: you are changing, not your circumstances, you. The things that once terrified you no longer have the same power over your mind. The situations that once caused panic now lead you toward prayer. The problems that once controlled your emotions no longer dominate every thought. At first, the change is almost invisible. Then one day you realize something remarkable. God has been strengthening you. While you were waiting for Him to change your situation, He was changing your heart. Another sign is an unusual sense of peace. Not because every question has been answered, not because every problem has disappeared, but because deep inside, you know God has not abandoned you. The book of Philippians, chapter 4, verse 7, describes a peace that surpasses understanding, a peace that cannot be explained by circumstances, a peace that exists because God's presence is greater than the uncertainty surrounding you. That peace is often one of heaven's earliest signals that God is near. Another sign is the way your perspective begins to change. Instead of constantly asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is God teaching me through this?" That shift changes everything, because growth begins when you stop viewing every challenge as an interruption and start seeing it as part of your development. God is also moving when new wisdom begins appearing in unexpected places. A conversation, a sermon, a Bible passage, a moment of insight during prayer. Suddenly, truths that you have heard before begin speaking directly into your situation. It is as if God is highlighting exactly what you need to hear at exactly the right time. Another sign that heaven is moving is that certain doors remain closed. That may sound strange. Most people celebrate open doors. Few people celebrate closed ones. Yet many believers eventually discover that God's protection often arrived disguised as disappointment. The opportunity that never happened, the relationship that ended, the plan that failed. Looking back, they realized that God was protecting them from something they could not see at the time. And perhaps one of the clearest signs of all is this: your desire for God becomes stronger than your desire for answers. That is a powerful transformation, because it means your faith is no longer based solely on receiving what you want. It is rooted in knowing who He is. When that happens, your relationship with God reaches a new level of maturity. And the beautiful reality is this: if heaven is already moving before the results appear, then your current struggle cannot be the final chapter of your story, because God never begins a work with the intention of abandoning it halfway through. Why your current struggle is not your final chapter. One of the most dangerous lies a person can believe is that what they are experiencing today is all they will ever experience. That lie sounds convincing when the struggle has lasted a long time. It sounds convincing when the prayers seem unanswered. It sounds convincing when the circumstances refuse to change. Day after day, the same battle appears in front of you. The same concerns, the same frustrations, the same uncertainty. Eventually, if you are not careful, your current situation begins to shape your expectations for the future. You stop expecting improvement. You stop expecting breakthroughs. You stop expecting God to do something new, not because you have stopped believing in Him, because disappointment has slowly lowered your expectations. That is exactly why this truth is so important. Your current struggle is a chapter. It is not the entire story. No one reads the middle of a book and assumes they know how it ends. Yet people do this with their lives all the time. They experience one difficult season and assume the future will look exactly the same. They experience one painful chapter and assume the story is over. But God has never been limited by a difficult chapter. Think about Joseph in prison. Think about David hiding in caves. Think about Ruth after losing everything. Think about Peter after denying Jesus. If you had looked at their lives during those moments, you could have easily believed their best days were behind them. But God was not finished. And if God was not finished with them, He is not finished with you. The book of Philippians chapter 1 verse 6 says that He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion. Notice the confidence in that promise. God does not start a work and abandon it. He does not begin building and then walk away. He finishes what He starts. That does not mean the process is easy. It does not mean there are no delays. It does not mean there are no seasons of uncertainty. It means that God's commitment to your future is stronger than your present difficulty. Sometimes we become so focused on where we are that we forget who is leading us. The same God who carried you through previous challenges is carrying you now. The same God who opened doors before can open doors again. The same God who provided in the past can provide in the future. Your struggle may be real. Your pain may be real. Your questions may be real, but they are temporary, because God's faithfulness is greater than all of them. There will come a day when the season you are living through right now will no longer be your present reality. It will be your testimony. You will look back and remember the prayers, the waiting, the uncertainty, and you will see how God was working in ways you could never fully understand at the time. In fact, one day you may discover that every delay, every detour, every closed door, and every unanswered question was connected to a purpose that only became visible when you finally reached the other side. One day you will understand why God led you this way. Right now, there may be things in your life that make absolutely no sense. Questions that remain unanswered. Doors that never opened. Prayers that seem to disappear into silence. Opportunities that slipped away. People who left. Dreams that did not unfold the way you expected. And if you are being honest, there may be moments when you have asked yourself a difficult question. God, why did you allow this? The truth is that some questions can only be answered with time. Some lessons can only be understood from the other side of the valley. Some parts of God's plan only become clear when you look backward instead of forward. That is one of the great mysteries of faith. We live life moving forward, but we understand much of it looking back. Think about Joseph. When he was thrown into a pit by his brothers, he could not see the palace. When he was sold into slavery, he could not see the purpose. When he sat in prison, he could not see the promotion. All he could see was the pain directly in front of him. Yet years later, everything connected. Every delay, every disappointment, every injustice, every unexpected turn. What once looked like chaos revealed itself as divine orchestration. The book of Genesis, chapter 50, verse 20, records Joseph saying, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." What an incredible statement. Joseph was not denying the suffering. He was recognizing God's sovereignty over it. That same truth applies to your life. There are events you do not understand today that may become some of the clearest evidence of God's faithfulness tomorrow. The relationship that ended may have protected your future. The opportunity you lost may have redirected your purpose. The delay you hated may have prepared you for a blessing you were not yet ready to receive. The closed door may have prevented a path that would have led you away from God's best. The reality is this: God sees what you cannot see. He knows what you do not know. He understands what you cannot yet understand. The book of Isaiah, chapter 46, verse 10 declares that God knows the end from the beginning. Think about that. While you are worried about tomorrow, God is already there. While you are wondering how things will work out, He already sees the outcome. While you are struggling to understand the next step, He already knows the entire journey. That is why faith is so powerful. Faith allows you to trust God's character when you cannot trace His plan. Faith allows you to keep moving when clarity has not yet arrived. Faith allows you to believe that God is working even when the evidence is still hidden. And perhaps that is the message you needed to hear today. You are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are not walking through this season alone. The God who guided Abraham through uncertainty, Joseph through betrayal, Moses through the wilderness, David through adversity, and countless others through impossible situations is guiding you as well. He has not lost sight of you. He has not stopped working. He has not forgotten His promises. Even now, in ways you cannot yet see, He is arranging circumstances, preparing opportunities, developing your character, strengthening your faith, and leading you toward a future that is bigger than your present understanding. One day, you will look back and see what you cannot see today. One day the confusion will make sense. One day the waiting will make sense. One day the detours will make sense. One day the closed doors will make sense. One day you will see that God was working in your favor the entire time. Until that day arrives, keep trusting Him. Keep praying. Keep believing. Keep moving forward. Because the same God who holds the stars in place is holding your life in His hands. And He has been holding the map all along.